Oops, I thought the help was supposed to wear black. Wearing white makes you look a little too clean for someone of your background. The cold splash hit Simone Ellis before the words even registered. A wave of dark red Cabernet Sauvignon drenched the front of her $5,000 white Armani suit. The liquid seeped instantly into the crisp fabric, turning the immaculate silk into a heavy crimson mess that clung to her skin. She gasped as the shock of the cold wine cut through the warm air of the Metropolitan Gala. Hunter Kensington stood before her holding an empty crystal goblet. His 19-year-old face was twisted into a smirk that reeked of inherited money and zero consequences. He did not stumble. He did not trip. He had poured the wine with the deliberate precision of a surgeon. Oops. Hunter said it again, but there was no apology in his eyes. Only malice. The jazz music seemed to stop. The chatter of 500 of New York's wealthiest elites died down. Then came the flash. One camera flash, followed by another and another, until Simone was blinded by a lightning storm of shutter clicks. They were not rushing to hand her a napkin. They were not gasping in horror. They were pulling out their phones. Simone stood perfectly still. The wine dripped from the hem of her blazer onto the marble floor. She could feel the sticky liquid running down her chest, but she refused to shiver. She refused to wipe it away frantically like a frightened maid. She was the CEO of Origen. She had fought her way out of the Chicago projects to build a biotech empire. She was not a victim. But as she looked around the room, she saw the truth reflecting in their eyes. To them, she was not an innovator. She was entertainment. Nice shot, Hunter. A boy in a prep school blazer laughed from the sidelines, holding his phone high to capture the perfect angle of Simone's humiliation. Simone looked down at her side. Her hand was gripping the handle of her leather portfolio so tight her knuckles were turning white. Inside that bag was the merger agreement. $750 million. That was the price Richard Kensington had begged her for. His family legacy was crumbling under debt, and Origen was his only lifeline. She had come here tonight to save them, and his son had just welcomed her by branding her with red wine. This is what they think of you. The voice in her head was sharp. It sounded like her grandmother. Never forget who they see when they look at you. Simone took a breath. She was about to speak when the crowd parted. Richard and Victoria Kensington glided toward the scene. They looked like royalty descending from a throne. Richard in his tuxedo and Victoria in a silver gown that cost more than Simone's first house. Finally, Simone thought. The adults are here. They will fix this. But Richard did not look at Hunter. He looked at the stain on Simone's chest with a look of mild annoyance, as if she were a piece of furniture that had been scratched. Hunter. Victoria sighed, but her tone was bored, not angry. You are wasting the vintage Bordeaux. That bottle costs $400. He ruined my suit, Simone said. Her voice was calm, but it carried a steel edge that cut through the murmurs. Victoria turned to her. Her eyes swept up and down Simone's ruined outfit. Oh, stop it, Simone. Hunter was just having a little fun. You are always so serious. It is just wine. Do not make a scene. We have important guests here. Make a scene, Simone repeated. The absurdity of it made her stomach turn. If it bothers you that much, Victoria continued, waving a hand dismissively. There is a staff bathroom down the hall behind the kitchen. I am sure they have some soda water. You can clean yourself up there. It is probably more what you are used to anyway. The staff bathroom. Not the guest powder room with the gold faucets. The staff bathroom behind the kitchen. Simone felt the heat rise up her neck. It was not shame. It was rage. Pure volcanic rage. They wanted to put her back in her place. They wanted to remind her that even with $1 billion valuation, she was still just the help to them. I am not going to the staff bathroom, Simone said. And I am not signing this contract. She turned to leave, but Richard's hand shot out and clamped onto her arm. His grip was painful. You are not going anywhere, Richard hissed. His charming public smile vanished, replaced by the snarl of a desperate predator. You need our distribution network, Simone. You have the heart medication, but you cannot get it to hospitals without Kensington Pharma. You are smart enough to know you have no choice. Let go of me, Simone said. You will go clean yourself up. Richard whispered, leaning close so only she could hear the venom in his voice. You will come back. You will smile for the cameras, and you will sign the papers. Because without us, you are just a little girl from the ghetto with a science experiment nobody can buy. Do not forget who holds the keys to the kingdom. He squeezed her arm harder. A warning. A command. Simone looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked at Hunter, who was snickering with his friends. Then she looked at Victoria, who was checking her reflection in a spoon. They really thought they held all the cards. They thought the $750 million was a favor they were doing for her. They had no idea she knew about the audit. They had no idea she knew about the debt maturing on Monday. They thought she was trapped. Simone smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a wolf that just realized the cage door was open. You are right, Richard, Simone said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. I do need to make a statement. She pulled her arm free from his grip. She did not walk toward the exit. She did not walk toward the staff bathroom. She turned and walked straight toward the stage. Where are you going? Victoria called out, her voice rising in panic. Simone, come back here. Simone ignored her. She walked through the crowd. The wine was still dripping from her jacket, leaving a trail of red drops on the pristine floor. People gasped as she passed, but she kept her head high. She climbed the stairs to the podium. The band stopped playing. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Simone stepped up to the microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces. She saw Hunter looking confused. She saw Richard and Victoria pushing their way through the crowd, their faces pale with sudden fear. She placed her leather portfolio on the podium. She unzipped it slowly. The sound of the zipper was amplified by the speakers echoing like a gunshot. She pulled out the thick document. The cover page read in bold letters, Kensington Pharma and Origen Strategic Merger Agreement. Good evening, everyone, Simone's voice boomed through the ballroom. I apologize for the interruption and for my appearance. It seems the Kensington hospitality is as authentic as their financial reports. A ripple of shock went through the room. Richard froze halfway to the stage. I came here tonight to sign a deal. Simone continued holding up the contract. A deal that would have transferred $750 million from my company to save Kensington Pharma from bankruptcy. Bankruptcy. The word hung in the air. Guests turned to each other, whispering frantically. You see, Simone said, locking eyes with Richard. Richard told me I had no choice. He told me I needed his distribution network. He told me I should be grateful. But tonight, his son reminded me of something very important. She looked down at the wine stain on her chest. He reminded me that integrity cannot be bought and respect cannot be negotiated. Simone took the contract in both hands. The paper was thick, expensive archival quality. You told me to clean up Richard, Simone said. So I am cleaning up my company portfolio. She ripped the contract. The sound of tearing paper was louder than any scream. She tore it in half. Then she tore the halves again. She threw the pieces into the air like confetti. Origen is officially withdrawing from all negotiations, Simone announced. We will build our own distribution network. It might take longer. It might cost more. But it will be ours. She leaned into the microphone. Her voice dropped to a deadly whisper. And Richard, I know the bank loan is due on Monday morning. I know you needed my deposit to cover it. I hope you have a backup plan, because you certainly do not have me. Phones throughout the room began to light up. Beeps and chimes echoed as stock alerts hit. Oh my God, someone shouted from the back. Kensington stock just dropped 12%. It is crashing. Another voice cried out. It is in free fall. Sell. Everyone sell. Pandemonium erupted. The polite gala turned into a trading floor of panic. People were shouting into their phones, dumping their Kensington shares. Richard stood paralyzed, watching his empire evaporate in real time. His face turned a sickly shade of gray. You bitch, Richard screamed. He lunged toward the stage. Security, get her out of here. Arrest her. Security guards rushed forward, but they hesitated. They looked at Simone, standing tall and powerful in her wine-stained suit. Then they looked at Richard, sweating and screaming like a madman. Simone picked up her empty portfolio. She walked down the stairs, meeting Richard's gaze one last time. "I would offer to pay for the cleaning bill," Simone said calmly as she walked past him. "But judging by the stock price, you are going to need every penny." She walked out of the ballroom, leaving the chaos behind her. The flashbulbs were still popping, but this time they weren't documenting her humiliation. They were documenting her victory. She walked out into the cool night air, feeling the wine dry on her skin. It didn't feel like a stain anymore. It felt like war paint. And the war had just begun. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of Simone's penthouse, but it brought no warmth. She woke up expecting the silence of victory. Instead, she woke up to the deafening noise of a digital execution. Her phone had vibrated off the nightstand and onto the floor. It was buzzing incessantly like an angry hornet. Simone picked it up. She expected to see messages of support. She expected to see investors cheering her bold move against the Kensington empire. She expected justice. What she saw made her blood run cold. The first notification was from the New York Chronicle. The headline screamed in bold black letters, "CEO meltdown. Is Origin boss Simone Ellis unstable?" She swiped it away. The next one was worse. The Financial Daily, usually a respectable paper, had a front-page editorial titled, "The Angry Executive. Why Simone Ellis is a Liability to the Biotech Industry." They were not talking about the wine. They were not talking about Hunter Kensington humiliating her. They were talking about her reaction. Simone turned on the television. The morning news was playing a clip on loop, but it was not the clip of what actually happened. The video started 3 seconds too late. It did not show Hunter pouring the vintage Cabernet over her white suit. It did not show him smirking. It did not show the crowd laughing while she stood there dripping in red wine. The video had been surgically altered. It started exactly at the moment Simone raised her voice. On the screen, millions of Americans saw a black woman screaming at a calm white family. They saw her ripping up a contract like a maniac. They saw Richard Kensington looking fearful and victimized, holding his hands up in a defensive gesture. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Origin CEO snaps at charity gala." Witnesses claim she was intoxicated. Intoxicated. Simone threw the remote onto the sofa. She had not touched a drop of alcohol last night. She had been working. But the narrative was already set. They were painting her with the oldest brush in the American history book. The angry, ungrateful black woman who could not handle the pressure of the big leagues. She opened social media. It was a mistake. The comments section was a sewer. Thousands of strangers who had never heard of Origin yesterday were now experts on her psychological state. "She belongs in the hood, not the boardroom," one user wrote. "This is what happens when you hire for diversity instead of merit." Another commented, "She looks dangerous. Someone should have called the police." They were erasing her dignity in real time. The Kensingtons had not just spun the story. They had rewritten reality. They used their media connections to turn the victim into the villain before breakfast. Simone paced her living room. Her chest felt tight. This was a coordinated attack. Richard Kensington had moved fast. He knew he could not win on the facts, so he decided to destroy her character. Then the landline on her desk rang. Only 5 people had that number. Her mother, her sister, her lawyer, and her bankers. Simone picked it up. She hoped it was her lawyer ready to sue for defamation. "Ms. Ellis." The voice was cool, dry, and terrifyingly polite. It was startlingly devoid of humanity. It was Clifton Vance, the senior risk officer at Sovereign Vanguard Bank. "Mr. Vance," Simone said, keeping her voice steady despite the shaking in her hands. "I assume you are calling to congratulate me on dodging a bad merger. The Kensingtons are insolvent." There was a pause on the line, a pause that lasted too long. "I am afraid that is not why I am calling Ms. Ellis," Vance said. "We have been monitoring the morning news cycle. Sovereign Vanguard has strict policies regarding the conduct of our high-level corporate clients." Simone laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Conduct. You mean you are watching edited videos of me defending myself against assault? We do not deal in context, Ms. Ellis. We deal in risk. Vance cut her off. The market is reacting poorly to your public display. Our analysts believe this erratic behavior suggests a deeper instability within Origen leadership. Erratic behavior. The words felt like a slap. What are you saying, Vance? I am saying that effective immediately, Sovereign Vanguard is freezing Origen's revolving line of credit. The room seemed to spin. That credit line was $50 million. It was the oxygen for her company. It paid the researchers. It kept the lights on in the labs. It covered payroll for 300 employees. You cannot do that. Simone said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. We have never missed a payment. We have perfect credit. You are freezing our accounts based on a tabloid rumor. We are invoking the reputational risk clause in your loan agreement. Vance recited it like he was reading a menu. Subsection 4, paragraph B. The bank reserves the right to suspend credit if the borrower engages in public conduct that brings disrepute to the institution. This is not policy. This is a hit job. Simone gripped the phone tight. Richard Kensington called you, didn't he? He is on your board of directors. I cannot discuss internal deliberations, Vance said. You have 48 hours to secure alternative funding before we call in the outstanding principal. Good day, Ms. Ellis. The line went dead. Simone stood in the middle of her penthouse, surrounded by luxury but feeling completely exposed. They were not just trying to humiliate her, they were trying to starve her. They were cutting off her money, her reputation, and her voice all at once. She looked at the television again. The edited video played once more. Her face contorted in anger on the screen, a monster created by an editing room. Richard Kensington wanted a war. He thought that by taking away her money and her name, she would crawl back to him and beg. He thought she would sign the contract just to make the pain stop. Simone walked to the window and looked out at the New York skyline. They had taken her credit. They had taken her reputation. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had backed her into a corner where she had nothing left to lose. And that was the most dangerous place a woman like her could ever be. The doorbell rang at 9:30 in the evening. It was a sharp intrusion into the silence of Simone's penthouse. She checked the security feed on her tablet. She expected to see a reporter or a process server delivering a lawsuit. Instead, she saw Tasha. Her younger sister was standing in the hallway holding a casserole dish and looking ready to fight the entire world. Behind her stood Brad. Simone's brother-in-law looked different tonight. Usually Brad was the easygoing guy who brought craft beer to family barbecues and made bad jokes about IT work. Tonight he looked pale. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Simone unlocked the door. Tasha did not say hello. She walked straight in and hugged Simone so hard it knocked the breath out of her. I saw the news, Tasha said, pulling back. Her eyes were red from crying. They edited the video, Simone. I saw the real one on your live stream, but the news is playing the fake one. They are making you look crazy. I called the station, but they hung up on me. I know, Simone said softly, closing the door. It is okay, Tasha. I can handle it. It is not okay, Tasha snapped, putting the food on the kitchen island. They are destroying everything you built. Mom is crying in Chicago. She thinks you are going to jail. Simone looked at Brad. He had not moved from the entryway. He was wearing his Kensington Pharma employee badge still clipped to his belt. He was staring at the floor, his hands deep in his pockets. Hello, Brad, Simone said. Brad flinched. He looked up and his eyes were full of a complicated misery. Guilt, fear, anger. I am sorry, Simone, Brad said. His voice cracked. I am so sorry. You did not pour the wine, Brad. You did not edit the video. No. Brad stepped further into the room. But I work for them. I sat in my cubicle today and listened to them laugh. I listened to the marketing team joke about how they were going to ruin you. They were taking bets on how long until you resigned. You should quit, Tasha said, turning to her husband. You cannot work for those monsters, Brad. Not after this. I cannot quit, Brad said. Not yet. Tasha's eyes widened in betrayal. What do you mean, not yet? They attacked my sister. I cannot quit because I know why they did it, Brad interrupted. He walked over to the kitchen island and placed his hands flat on the marble. He looked at Simone with an intensity she had never seen in him before. Simone listened. She saw the shift in him. This was not Brad the family man. This was Brad the senior systems administrator. It does not make sense, Simone, Brad said fast and low. Richard Kensington is a bigot. Yes, he hates that a black woman from Chicago holds the keys to his company's survival. But Richard is also a greed monster. He needs your money. Destroying your reputation hurts the merger. It drives down the stock price. It hurts him too. He is irrational, Simone said. He lost his temper because I humiliated him. No. Brad shook his head. It is too coordinated. The bank freezing your credit this morning. The media hit pieces. The edited video appearing 2 hours after the gala. That takes planning. They were ready to destroy you the moment you stepped out of line. So why do it? Simone asked. Because he is terrified of you, Brad whispered. He looked around the apartment as if checking for listening devices. Then he leaned in closer. 2 days ago, I was doing routine server maintenance on the executive drive. Usually that sector is encrypted, but someone in Richard's office left a temporary bridge open for the audit team. I saw a folder structure that was not supposed to be there. What kind of folder? Simone asked. Her instincts were waking up. It was hidden inside the legacy archive, Brad said. It was named Project Clean Sweep. Clean Sweep. The name sounded innocent enough, like a janitorial initiative. I thought it was just deleting old emails, Brad continued. But I saw the file metadata. They are not emails. They are patient records, Simone. Thousands of them. All from the clinical trials of the K7 heart medication, the one they need your distribution network for. Simone's blood ran cold. The K7 drug was their flagship product. It was supposed to be a miracle cure for hypertension in elderly patients. The official FDA report says the drug is safe, Brad said. But the files in Clean Sweep have a different tag. They are tagged with the code DRE. That stands for Drug-Related Event. In IT, we call that a corpse tag. What are you saying, Brad? I am saying the dates on those files match a spike in cardiac arrests in 3 test markets, Brad said, his voice trembling. Detroit, Atlanta, New Orleans. Simone closed her eyes. Detroit, Atlanta, New Orleans. Cities with predominantly black populations. They tested it on us, Simone whispered. And it killed people, Brad said. That is why Richard was so desperate for the merger. He does not just need your money. He needs your company to bury the old data. If Origen acquires Kensington, the legal liability gets diluted. You would inherit the graveyard. And once the merger is signed, he planned to wipe the Clean Sweep folder forever. Tasha covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God. They are murderers. Brad looked at Simone. Richard attacked you last night because you hesitated. When you ripped up that contract, you did not just hurt his pride. You threatened to expose a cover-up that could send his entire family to prison for life. That is why he is trying to destroy you. He needs to discredit you so that if you ever find the truth, nobody will believe you. Simone walked to the window. The city lights blurred before her eyes. This was not a business rivalry anymore. This was not about wine on a suit. This was about lives. Thousands of lives. You have to get those files, Tasha said. Brad, you have to copy them. No. Simone turned around sharply. Absolutely not. Simone, please, Brad argued. I have admin access. If I go in at night, I can use a localized bypass. You said it yourself, Simone said. They are watching everything. They are coordinated. If Richard is willing to kill patients to save his stock price, what do you think he will do to a rogue IT employee? I cannot just stand by and watch them do this to you, Brad said. I am part of this family too. You are part of this family, Simone said, grabbing his shoulders. Which is why I need you safe. If they catch you, they will not just fire you, they will crush you. You have a daughter to raise. You are not playing spy games for me. But you need proof, Brad said. Without the files, it is just your word against $1 billion legacy. I will find another way, Simone lied. She did not know another way, but she looked at Brad and she saw the terror behind his bravery. He was a good man, but he was not a soldier. Promise me, Simone commanded. Promise me you will not touch those servers. Brad hesitated. He looked at Tasha. Then he looked back at Simone. I promise, Brad said. He lied. Simone saw it in his eyes. It was the same look she saw in the mirror every morning. The look of someone who had decided that doing the right thing was worth the risk of burning down their entire life. She hugged him. She hugged him because she was grateful, and she hugged him because she was terrified that this might be the last time she saw him safe. Go home, Simone told them. Kiss my niece for me. Lock your doors. When they left, the apartment felt bigger and colder than before. Simone sat on her couch in the dark. Project Clean Sweep. They were poisoning her people and using her money to buy the shovel to bury the bodies. She looked at her phone. The battery was dying. The hate comments were still rolling in, but the fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Richard Kensington thought he was fighting a PR battle. He thought he was fighting a woman who cared about her reputation. He was wrong. He was fighting a woman who now knew where the bodies were buried, and his own employee had just given her the map. The air in the Origen executive boardroom was always kept at a precise 68 degrees. Today it felt like absolute zero. Simone walked through the double glass doors. She was 5 minutes early, but the 12 men seated around the long mahogany table were already there. They stopped talking the moment she entered. These were the men she had made rich. When Simone started Origen in a rented garage, these men were the only ones who would take a meeting with her. Not because they believed in her vision, but because they wanted to buy her patents for pennies. She had refused to sell. Instead, she made them board members. She had turned their initial investments into hundreds of millions of dollars. She thought that bought loyalty. She was wrong. Good morning, gentlemen, Simone said. She took her seat at the head of the table. She placed her phone face down. She kept her posture perfect. Nobody said good morning back. Harlan Thorne sat at the opposite end of the table. He was 70 years old with silver hair and a reputation for ruthlessness that rivaled Richard Kensington. He did not look at Simone. He looked at a single sheet of paper in front of him. We are skipping the minutes, Harlan said. His voice was dry and devoid of any warmth. We are moving directly to new business, specifically the immediate leadership crisis. Crisis. Simone repeated the word calmly. You mean the smear campaign? I mean the stock price. Harlan corrected her. He slid the paper down the table. It stopped perfectly in front of her. Origen is down 14% since the market opened. Sovereign Vanguard has frozen our credit lines. 3 major hospital chains have paused their orders pending an internal review of our stability. They are reacting to a lie, Simone said. She looked around the table, making eye contact with each man. Bill, you know me. You know I did not attack that boy. George, you were at my wedding. You know who I am. Bill looked at his cufflinks. George stared at the water pitcher. This is not personal, Simone, Harlan said. This is fiduciary duty. We have a responsibility to our shareholders. Right now, you are radioactive. The Kensington family is threatening a lawsuit that could bankrupt us before we even get to court. So we fight them, Simone said, leaning forward. We sue them for defamation. We expose their financial desperation. We cannot afford a fight. Harlan cut her off. We do not have the liquidity. The bank made sure of that. He folded his hands. There is a solution. Richard Kensington reached out to me this morning. Of course he did. Simone felt a bitter laugh rising in her throat, but she swallowed it. He is willing to drop the lawsuit. Harlan continued. He is even willing to reinstate the merger offer at the original price. But he has one non-negotiable condition. Me, Simone said. You. Harlan nodded. He wants you gone, Simone. Not just from the CEO role. He wants you off the board. He wants a complete severance. And let me guess. Simone said, her voice trembling with controlled fury. You are considering it. We are not just considering it, Harlan said. We have drafted the motion. The silence that followed was heavy. It pressed against Simone's chest. She looked at these men. They were not evil. They were just cowards. They were afraid of losing their money. They were afraid of the bad press. And deep down, they were probably relieved. They had never been comfortable taking orders from a black woman from the South Side. Now they had an excuse to take back the keys. I built this company. Simone stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I wrote the code for the genetic sequencing algorithms. I negotiated the patent rights. I hired every single scientist in our labs. You are sitting in a building that my sweat paid for. And now you are burning it down. Harlan stood up too. He was not intimidated. He was tired. Look at the news, Simone. You are a liability. The public thinks you are unstable. The banks think you are risky. We cannot operate with a CEO who is fighting a personal war on Twitter. It is not a personal war. Simone slammed her hand on the table. They are hiding something. The Kensingtons are dangerous. Then prove it. Harlan challenged her. Show me the evidence, right now. Do you have documents? Do you have recordings? Or do you just have a hunch? Simone froze. She thought of Brad. She thought of the clean sweep files. She thought of the promise she made to keep her sister safe. She had the truth, but she could not use it. Not yet. I need time, Simone said. We do not have time. Harlan sat back down. We have scheduled a formal vote for Friday morning at 9 o'clock. That gives you 48 hours. 48 hours, if you resign voluntarily before the vote. Harlan said, his voice softening slightly. We can offer you a generous exit package. You can keep your vested stock. You can walk away with dignity. Dignity. They were asking her to sell her life work for a golden parachute. They wanted her to take the money and go quietly into the night while Richard Kensington took over her company and buried his crimes. If you force us to vote, Harlan warned, we will remove you for cause. You will leave with nothing. No package, no stock, just the shame. Simone looked at the clock on the wall. It was ticking. Every second was a second closer to the end of everything she had built. I will see you on Friday, Simone said. She grabbed her phone and walked out. She did not look back. She did not let them see her hands shaking. She walked to the elevator. When the doors closed, she finally let out the breath she had been holding. She was alone. Her board had betrayed her. Her bank had abandoned her. The media was hunting her. She had 48 hours. She needed a miracle. Or she needed a weapon. She took out her phone. She looked at the contact list. She scrolled past her lawyers, past her PR team. She stopped on a number she had not called in years. A number from her old life. Before the suits, before the millions. Richard Kensington thought he had isolated her. He thought he had stripped her of her power. But he forgot one thing. You do not survive the Chicago projects by relying on boardrooms and banks. You survive by knowing how to fight when you are cornered. Simone pressed call. She was done playing by their rules. The Kensington Pharma headquarters was a glass fortress that loomed over the financial district like a black monolith. At 2 a.m, the building was silent, but it was not asleep. The servers in the basement were humming. The cameras were watching, and the secrets inside were waiting to be found. Brad stood at the service entrance. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped his key card twice before he could slide it into the reader. The little light on the scanner blinked red. Then it blinked red again. Brad held his breath. He had been a systems administrator here for 5 years. His access should have been revoked hours ago when Richard Kensington declared war on his family. But corporate bureaucracy was slow. Richard was focused on PR spin and legal threats. He had forgotten to tell HR to kill the badge of a mid-level IT guy. The light turned green. The lock clicked open. Brad slipped inside. The air conditioning hit him instantly. It was freezing. The hallway stretched out before him, long and sterile, with polished floors that reflected the emergency exit lights. He walked fast. He kept his head down. He knew exactly where the blind spots were in the camera coverage. He had installed half of them. He made it to the elevator bank without seeing a soul. He pressed the button for the sub-basement. The doors slid open with a soft chime that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet lobby. Hold the door. The voice was deep and authoritative. Brad froze. He instinctively reached for the closed door button, but it was too late. A large hand blocked the sensor, and the doors bounced back open. Frank Miller, the chief of security, stepped into the elevator. Frank was a former NYPD officer who treated the building like a crime scene. He looked at Brad. He looked at the sweat on Brad's forehead. He looked at the empty backpack slung over Brad's shoulder. "Working late, Brad?" Frank asked. His eyes narrowed. This was the moment. If Brad stammered, if he looked guilty, if he showed an ounce of the terror that was gripping his heart, Frank would detain him. Frank knew about the merger collapse. He knew the company was in crisis. Brad forced a laugh. It was a pathetic, breathless sound. "I wish I was working, Frank," Brad said, shaking his head. "I am actually an idiot. I left my laptop charger at my desk. My wife is threatening to divorce me if I don't finish the budget report by tomorrow morning. You know how it is." He leaned against the elevator wall, trying to look like a tired suburban dad who was just annoyed by a minor inconvenience. He played the role that society had written for him. The harmless white guy, the bumbling husband, the guy who belonged. Frank studied him for a second. He looked at the badge on Brad's belt, then he looked at Brad's shoes. "Yeah, I know how it is," Frank grunted. "My ex-wife used to lock me out of the house if I forgot milk." Frank pressed the button for the lobby. "Make it quick, Brad. We are locking down the perimeter in 20 minutes. The boss is paranoid tonight. I will be in and out," Brad promised. The elevator stopped at the lobby. Frank got out. He did not look back. Brad waited until the doors closed completely. Then he collapsed against the metal wall, gasping for air. He was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. He pressed the button for the server farm again. He had passed the test. Not because he was a good liar, but because to men like Frank, Brad did not look like a threat. He did not look like an infiltrator. He looked like one of them. The elevator opened into the server room. It was a vast, windowless space filled with rows of black towers. The noise was deafening. Thousands of cooling fans whirring in unison. Blue status lights blinked in the darkness like thousands of unblinking eyes. Brad ran to Terminal 4. This was the legacy bridge, the one place where the old archives connected to the new cloud system. He plugged his personal laptop into the maintenance port. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Login. Admin B. Mitchell. Password. Access denied. Brad cursed. They had not revoked his badge, but they had flagged his user account. Richard was smarter than he thought. But Brad knew this system. He knew its ghosts. He switched to the command line interface. He typed in a backdoor command he had written himself 3 years ago for remote troubleshooting. A simple bypass that tricked the server into thinking he was a diagnostic bot. Access granted. The screen filled with directories. Brad ignored the financial files. He ignored the emails. He typed in the search bar, Project Clean Sweep. The folder appeared. It was massive, 5 terabytes of data. Brad opened the first subfolder. It was titled Phase 3 Clinical Trials. K7 Beta. He opened a PDF. It was a patient log from a clinic in Detroit. Patient 404. African American male. Age 58. Dosage 50 milligrams. Status deceased. Cause of death ischemic stroke. Brad frowned. A stroke during a hypertension trial was rare, but not impossible. He scrolled down. Patient 412. African American female. Age 62. Dosage 50 milligrams. Status deceased. Cause of death. Massive cerebral hemorrhage. He scrolled faster. The words repeated over and over. Deceased. Stroke. Deceased. Aneurysm. Deceased. Cardiac arrest. He opened the summary spreadsheet. The data was visualized in a cold, colorful pie chart. The drug worked perfectly on Caucasian patients. The side effects were mild nausea and dizziness. But in the African American test group, the drug interacted with a specific genetic marker common in West African ancestry. It caused the blood to thicken rapidly. The stroke rate was not 0.1%. It was 15%. 15%. That was not a side effect. That was Russian roulette. Brad felt like he was going to vomit. He opened a memo attached to the data. It was signed by Richard Kensington. The subject line read, FDA Submission Strategy. The text was short and brutal. Exclude the Detroit and Atlanta cohorts from the final submission. Classify these deaths as lifestyle-related comorbidities. The drug is safe for the general market. We cannot afford a delay to re-engineer the formula. Proceed with the launch. Brad stared at the screen. Richard Kensington had looked at a spreadsheet that showed his drug killed 1 in 6 black people, and he had decided to sell it anyway. He had decided that black lives were an acceptable overhead cost for his profit margin. This was not just corporate negligence. This was a massacre. And Simone was right. Richard was not just afraid of losing money. He was afraid of going to prison for the rest of his life. Brad clicked the download button. The progress bar appeared. Downloading. Time remaining 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Brad looked at the door. He was alone in the basement with the proof of mass murder. And upstairs, the men who signed the death warrants were watching the cameras. He had to wait. He had to stand there and watch the little green bar crawl across the screen while the ghosts of hundreds of patients screamed from the hard drive. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Tasha. "Where are you?" Brad did not answer. He could not tell her. He watched the percentage tick up. 10%, 20%. He was not just an IT guy anymore. He was the only witness to a genocide. And if Richard Kensington found him down here, Brad knew he would never make it out of this building alive. The underground parking garage was a concrete echo chamber. Every footstep sounded like a gunshot. Brad walked fast, clutching his backpack to his chest. He could feel the heat of the laptop through the fabric. It was burning against his ribs. 5 terabytes of death. 5 terabytes of truth. He reached his car. It was a sensible 10-year-old sedan parked in the far corner under a flickering yellow light. He fumbled for his keys. He just needed to get inside. He just needed to start the engine and drive until he hit the highway. "Nice night for a drive." The voice came from the shadows behind a concrete pillar. Brad dropped his keys. They clattered loudly on the oil-stained floor. Hunter Kensington stepped into the light. He was not wearing a tuxedo tonight. He was wearing a designer leather jacket and holding a baseball bat that looked brand new. He tapped the bat against his palm. Tap, tap, tap. He was not alone. 3 other boys stepped out from behind a black SUV. They were big. They were laughing. They looked like they were getting ready for a game of lacrosse, but their eyes were empty and cruel. "Hunter," Brad said. His voice was a dry croak. "I am just going home. With company property." Hunter smiled. He pointed the bat at Brad's backpack. "Daddy got a security alert. Someone accessed the basement archives. He was worried it was a corporate spy. But I told him, no, it is just the brother-in-law. It is just the traitor. I did not take anything." Brad lied. He took a step back. "Give me the bag, Brad." Hunter stopped smiling. "Now." Brad looked at the exit ramp. It was 50 yards away. He could never outrun them, but he could not give them the laptop. If he gave them the laptop, the evidence was gone forever, and the people Kensington killed would never get justice. "No," Brad said. He turned and threw the backpack underneath his car. He kicked it as hard as he could, sliding it deep toward the back axle where they could not reach it easily. Hunter sighed. He looked at his friends. "He wants to be a hero, boys. Teach him a lesson." The first swing hit Brad in the ribs. The sound of cracking bone echoed off the walls. Brad fell to his knees, gasping for air that would not come. He curled into a ball, trying to protect his head. But there were too many of them. Kicks rained down on him. Expensive sneakers slamming into his back, his kidneys, his face. He tasted copper. His vision blurred into red and black static. He heard Hunter's laughter floating above the violence. "Grab the bag," Hunter ordered. One of the boys dragged the backpack out from under the car. He handed it to Hunter. Hunter unzipped it. He pulled out the laptop. He held it high like a trophy. "You think you can steal from my family?" Hunter shouted down at Brad's broken body. "You think you are smart." Hunter threw the laptop onto the concrete. It shattered. Then he raised the baseball bat and brought it down on the machine. Once, twice, 3 times. Metal crunched, glass sprayed. The hard drive containing the only copy of the clean sweep files was reduced to a pile of twisted scrap. "Tell Simone she's next," Hunter whispered. He kicked Brad one last time in the head. Then they walked away, leaving him bleeding out on the cold gray floor. The intensive care unit smelled like antiseptic and fear. The only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. Simone stood in the doorway. She was still wearing her office clothes, but she felt like she was naked in a snowstorm. Tasha was sitting by the bed holding Brad's hand. Her sister looked small. She looked broken. Simone walked to the bedside. She looked down at Brad. She barely recognized him. His face was a map of violence. His left eye was swollen shut, a dark purple bruise that spread across his cheekbone. His jaw was wired. His arm was in a cast, suspended by a sling. A tube was running down his throat, breathing for him because his cracked ribs had punctured a lung. "He is in a medically induced coma," Tasha whispered without looking up. "The doctors say the swelling in his brain needs to go down. They do not know if he will wake up." Simone reached out and touched Brad's uninjured shoulder. It felt cold. "He promised me," Simone said softly. Her voice trembled. "He promised me he would stay safe. He did it for you." Tasha looked up. Her eyes were burning with tears and accusation. "He went back for you, Simone. And now look at him." Simone looked. She looked at the tubes. She looked at the bruises. She looked at the empty space where her brother-in-law used to be. Richard Kensington did not just attack a competitor. He did not just protect his business. He sent his son to beat a father to death in a parking garage. Something inside Simone snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a door locking. For 20 years, she had played by the rules. She had worked twice as hard to get half as far. She had met their insults with dignity. She had met their lawsuits with lawyers. She had tried to be the better person, but the better person was standing in a hospital room watching her family die. The better person was useless. Simone leaned down and kissed Brad's forehead. She tasted the salt of her own tears. "I am sorry, Brad," she whispered. "I tried to do this the clean way." She straightened up. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there in a penthouse on the Upper East Side, the Kensingtons were probably toasting to their victory. They thought the problem was solved. They thought the laptop was destroyed and the witness was silenced. They thought they had won. Simone wiped her eyes. Her hand was steady now. Her heart was beating slow and hard like a war drum. "Tasha," Simone said. She did not turn around. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. It looked like a predator. "What?" Tasha asked. "Do not cry anymore," Simone said. "Save your tears. You are going to need them for when we bury the Kensingtons." Simone took out her phone. She dialed her lawyer's number. It was 3 in the morning. She did not care. "Wake up, everyone," Simone said when he answered. "We are not settling. We are not resigning. Not. I want you to liquidate my personal assets. Sell the houses. Sell the art. Sell everything." "Simone, what are you doing?" The lawyer asked, his voice thick with sleep. "I am buying a war chest," Simone said. "And then I am going to burn their entire kingdom to the ground." "The laptop is gone, Tasha," Simone said, pacing the length of her living room. "Hunter smashed it to pieces. The police said the hard drive was unrecognizable. It is just metal dust now." Simone stopped at the window. The city looked vast and indifferent. Richard Kensington had won. He had beaten her brother-in-law into a coma and destroyed the only evidence of his crimes. Without those files, Simone was just a disgruntled ex-partner with a conspiracy theory. "They won, Tasha," Simone whispered. "I have to settle. I have to resign. It is the only way to pay for Brad's medical bills and keep you safe." "No." The word was quiet, but hard as granite. Simone turned around. Tasha was sitting on the sofa holding a plastic bag of personal effects the hospital had given her. Brad's clothes, his wallet, and his smartwatch. Tasha stood up. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were dry. You think Brad is stupid? Tasha asked. You think my husband walked into a lion's den with only one plan? He is an IT architect, Simone. He builds redundancies for a living. Tasha reached into the bag and pulled out the watch. The screen was cracked from the beating, but the little green light on the back was still blinking. He told me something before he left, Tasha said. He said that if anything happened to the hardware, I should check the cloud. Simone walked over. She took the watch. It was an older model, clunky and scratched. She tapped the screen. It flickered to life. Look at the sync log, Tasha pointed. Simone scrolled down. Her breath caught in her throat. 02:14 a.m. Upload complete. File size 5.2 terabytes. He did not keep the files on the laptop, Simone realized. He used the laptop as a bridge. He was uploading the data to his personal cloud server the entire time he was in the basement. He knew he might get caught, Tasha said. He knew he might not make it to the car, so he made sure the truth got out, even if he didn't. Simone stared at the cracked watch. It was not just a piece of technology. It was Brad's life insurance policy. Hunter Kensington had destroyed a decoy. He had beaten a man half to death for a piece of metal while the real weapon beamed silently into the sky. Simone ran to her desk. She opened her secure terminal. She typed in Brad's cloud credentials, which Tasha read off a crumpled piece of paper. Authentication successful. The folder appeared on the screen. Project Clean Sweep. It was all there. Every patient record. Every death certificate. Every memo signed by Richard Kensington authorizing the cover-up. Simone grabbed her phone. She did not call the expensive corporate lawyers who had advised her to settle. She called the people who had been with her when Origen was just an idea in a basement. Get to my apartment, Simone said into the phone. Bring coffee, bring your laptops, and bring a burner phone. We are going to war. By 4 a.m, Simone's living room had been transformed into a command center. There were 5 of them. Marcus, a disbarred lawyer who knew every loophole in the book. Sarah, a data forensic analyst who had grown up in the same housing project as Simone. And 3 junior researchers who were loyal to the bone. They worked in silence. The only sound was the clicking of keyboards and the turning of digital pages. Look at this, Sarah said, pointing to her screen. She highlighted a column of data. The stroke victims in Detroit. They all had the same genetic marker. Kensington knew. Look at this email from their chief science officer. Simone read the email. It was dated 2 years ago. We are seeing a 15% mortality rate in the target demographic. Recommendation is to terminate the trial immediately. And here is Richard's reply. Marcus said, pulling up another document. Terminate the trial but bury the data. We are too deep in R&D costs. Scrub the cohort from the final FDA submission. He signed it, Simone said. Her finger traced the digital signature on the screen. He literally signed the death warrant. This is not just fraud, Marcus said, leaning back. This is negligent homicide. This is a class action lawsuit that will make the tobacco settlements look like parking tickets. We are not suing them, Simone said. Her eyes were fixed on the screen. Suing takes too long. Richard will drag it out for years. He will buy judges. He will settle out of court and seal the records. Then what are we doing? Sarah asked. Tomorrow morning, Richard is testifying before the Senate Oversight Committee, Simone said. He is going to ask the government for $1 billion bailout. He is going to play the victim. He is going to tell the world that I am the villain who destroyed an American institution. Simone stood up. The sun was just beginning to rise over the city, turning the sky a blood red. I am going to let him speak. I am going to let him lie under oath. And then I am going to walk into that hearing, and I am going to bury him with his own words. She looked at Tasha, who was sleeping fitfully on the couch, clutching Brad's watch. Pack the files, Simone ordered. Encrypted drives only. 1 copy for the Senate, 1 copy for the FBI, and 1 copy for the press. She walked to the window. She felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. It was heavy, but it felt good. It felt like justice. Get dressed, Simone told her team. We have a hearing to catch. The Senate Oversight Committee room smelled like history and furniture polish. It was a theater designed for intimidation, with high mahogany benches for the senators and a small, lonely table for the witness. But Richard Kensington was not intimidated. He was an actor stepping onto his favorite stage. He had chosen his costume carefully for this performance. Gone were the tuxedo and the silk ties. Gone was the Patek Philippe watch that cost more than a house. Today, Richard wore a modest gray suit that was slightly ill-fitting. He wore a tie that looked like something a high school principal would buy at a discount store. He had even asked his makeup artist to add dark circles under his eyes. He did not look like a billionaire tyrant. He looked like a broken man. The room was packed. Photographers lined the back wall. Their lenses looked like the barrels of rifles aimed at his head. But Richard did not flinch. He adjusted the microphone. He looked up at the panel of 12 senators. Mr. Kensington, Senator Sterling began. He was a man Richard had donated to for 2 decades. We are here to discuss your request for an emergency federal bailout of $1 billion. This is a significant amount of taxpayer money. Why should the American people save your company? Richard leaned forward. He let his hands tremble just enough to be visible on the C-SPAN cameras. Senator, Richard said. His voice was soft and raspy. I am not asking you to save my company. I am asking you to save American lives. He paused for effect. He looked down at his prepared notes, then pushed them away as if speaking from the heart. Kensington Pharma has been a pillar of this country for 50 years. We make the medicines that keep your grandmothers alive. We employ 6,000 workers in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Good, honest Americans. And until 3 days ago, we were about to sign a merger that would have secured our future for another century. But then, Richard swallowed hard. Then the mob came for us. He looked directly into the camera lens. We live in a terrifying time, Senator. A time where a 30-second video clip edited out of context can destroy a legacy overnight. You all saw the footage from the gala. You saw an unfortunate accident involving a spilled drink. But the internet did not see an accident. They saw a target. Richard wiped his eye with a plain white handkerchief. Ms. Simone Ellis and her company Origen decided to weaponize that moment. She did not just walk away from a business deal. She launched a crusade. She used her platform to incite a boycott. She used her influence to freeze our credit lines. She is not a businesswoman, Senator. She is a vandal. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Richard saw the shift. He was winning. They call it cancel culture. Richard continued, his voice gaining strength. But I call it economic terrorism. Because of her vendetta, innocent factory workers are going to lose their health insurance next week. Because of her ego, the supply chain for our life-saving heart medication K7 is at risk. He hit the key word. Heart medication. If we go bankrupt, Senator, the production of K7 stops. Patients will not get their pills. Hospitals will run dry. People will die. Not because of a market failure, but because one woman decided to play God with the economy to satisfy her own grudge. Senator Sterling nodded slowly. He looked grave. So you are saying, Mr. Kensington, that this bailout is necessary to prevent a public health crisis caused by Origen? Precisely, Richard said. We are the victims here. My son is being harassed. My wife cannot leave our house. We are under siege. He leaned back in his chair. Under the table, his legs stopped shaking. He had done it. He had twisted the narrative so completely that the villain had become the hero. He had turned the woman he tried to destroy into the monster who was destroying him. He looked at the faces of the senators. They were buying it. They were terrified of being blamed for a medicine shortage. They would sign the check. They would give him the $1 billion. And with that money, Richard would bury the clean sweep files forever. He would pay off the families. He would silence the whistleblowers. He would win. Thank you, Mr. Thank God. Kensington, Senator Sterling said. Your testimony is compelling. Richard lowered his head in a show of humility, but inside he was smiling. The truth did not matter in this room. Only the story mattered, and he was the best storyteller in Washington. The gavel was about to fall. Senator Sterling reached for the wooden hammer that would seal the hearing and likely approve the $1 billion bailout. Richard Kensington began to close his briefcase. He made sure to move slowly. He wanted the cameras to capture his relief. He wanted the world to see the face of a man who had survived a witch hunt and emerged victorious. "Mr. Chairman." The voice cut through the room like a serrated knife. It did not come from the gallery. It came from the far end of the dais. Senator Eleanor Davis tapped her microphone. She was the junior senator from Illinois, a black woman who had spent 20 years as a prosecutor before coming to Washington. Richard had ignored her during his testimony. He considered her irrelevant. She was not on his payroll. She was just a quiet observer taking notes in a leather binder. But she was not quiet now. "Senator Davis." Chairman Sterling sighed. "We are concluding the session. I have 5 minutes of remaining time, Mr. Chairman," Senator Davis said. Her voice was calm but immovable. "And under Senate Rule 23, I reserve the right to call a final witness to speak on the technical efficacy of the K7 pharmaceutical program." Richard froze. His hand hovered over the brass latch of his briefcase. A technical witness. His scientists were all in Switzerland. Who could they possibly have called on such short notice? "Is this witness present?" the chairman asked, looking annoyed. "She is." Senator Davis pointed to the double oak doors at the back of the chamber. The room turned, the cameras swiveled, the heavy doors swung open, and Simone Ellis walked in. She was not wearing the stained white suit from the gala. She was not wearing the frantic expression of the woman in the edited video. She was wearing a structured navy blazer that looked like armor. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She carried nothing. No purse, no phone, just a single encrypted hard drive clutched in her right hand. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a predator entering a clearing. Simone walked down the center aisle. The sound of her heels on the marble floor echoed rhythmically. Click, click, click. It sounded like a clock counting down. Richard felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at his lawyers in the front row. They looked just as confused as he was. They started checking their phones frantically, looking for an injunction or a strategy. But there was no strategy for this. This was an ambush. Simone passed the press gallery. The reporters who had written hit pieces about her mental stability yesterday were now scrambling to get a clear shot of her face. She did not look at them. Her eyes were locked on one target, Richard Kensington. She reached the witness table. There was only one empty chair. It was directly next to Richard. "Please take your seat, Ms. Ellis," Senator Davis said. Simone sat down. She was close enough to smell Richard's expensive cologne. It smelled like bergamot and fear. She placed the hard drive on the table between them. It was a small black rectangle, but to Richard it looked like a bomb. "Mr. Chairman," Senator Davis continued, "I have invited Ms. Ellis not as the CEO of Origen, but as the nation's leading expert on genetic biocompatibility. Her company owns the patent for the sequencing technology that Kensington Pharma used to develop their heart medication. If anyone knows how this drug works or how it fails, it is her." Richard leaned away from the microphone. He turned his head slightly so only Simone could see his face. He forced a smile. It was a tight, painful grimace that looked like a rictus of hate. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here," Richard whispered through clenched teeth, "after what my son did to your family." Simone did not flinch. She turned her head slowly. She looked into his watery blue eyes. She saw the panic swimming behind them. He was trying to intimidate her because it was the only weapon he had left. "I heard you testify, Richard," Simone said. Her voice was low and steady. "I heard you tell the world that you are the victim." "I am the victim," Richard hissed. "And you are a trespassing lunatic. Do you really think this little stunt will save you? The bailout is done. The money is mine. The narrative is set." He leaned closer, invading her personal space. "Did you come here to apologize?" Richard asked. "Did you come here to beg me to call off the bank? Because if you get on your knees right now and admit you lied, I might leave you with enough money to buy a studio apartment in the Bronx." Simone looked at him. She looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. She looked at the trembling of his hands that he was trying so hard to hide under the table. She thought of Brad lying in a hospital bed with tubes in his throat. She thought of the thousands of files on the drive sitting between them. She smiled. It was the coldest smile Richard had ever seen. "I did not come to apologize, Richard," Simone whispered back. "Then why are you here?" he demanded. Simone leaned in until she was inches from his ear. "I came to walk you to prison." Richard's eyes widened. He pulled back as if she had burned him. Before he could respond, Senator Davis spoke again. "Ms. Ellis, you have provided the committee with digital evidence regarding the clinical trials of the K7 drug. Can you explain to this chamber and to the American people what is contained on that drive?" Richard lunged for the microphone. "Objection," he shouted. His voice cracked. "This is proprietary data. Ms. Ellis is a competitor. She is trying to steal trade secrets. This is corporate espionage." "Sit down, Mr. Kensington." The chairman banged his gavel. "You are not a lawyer, and this is not a courtroom. It will be soon," Simone said clearly into her microphone. She looked at the cameras. She looked at the red tally lights that told her millions of people were watching. She was ready. "The drive contains the unredacted patient logs from the Detroit and Atlanta trials," Simone stated. Her voice rang out clear and strong. "It contains the death certificates of 214 African-American patients who died of strokes caused by this drug. And it contains the emails signed by Richard Kensington ordering those deaths to be hidden from the FDA." The room erupted. Senators jumped to their feet. Reporters shouted questions. Flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. Lies. Richard screamed, standing up. He knocked over his water glass. "She is lying. She is hysterical. Arrest her." But nobody was looking at him. They were looking at the screen behind the dais. Senator Davis had plugged in the copy of the drive Simone had sent her. The first document appeared on the giant monitors. It was the memo, the death warrant. Signed in Richard's distinct looping handwriting. "Scrub the cohort. Proceed with the launch." Richard looked at the screen. He looked at the signature. It was 10 feet tall. There was no hiding from it. He felt his knees give way. He slumped back into his chair, gasping for air. Simone watched him crumble. She did not gloat. She did not cheer. She simply sat there, staring at the man who had tried to destroy her life. She watched as the realization hit him. He had not just lost the money. He had lost his freedom. He had lost his name. He had lost everything. And the woman he called the help was the one who had served him the warrant. The chamber was silent, waiting for Richard's answer. He leaned into the microphone. His face was composed. His voice was steady. He looked like the picture of American success. "The K7 medication is safe, Senator," Richard said. "We have tested it on thousands of patients. The data is irrefutable. Any claim that this drug is dangerous is a fabrication designed to hurt my stock price. It is 100% safe." Simone did not interrupt him. She let him finish. She let the lie hang in the air for a moment so everyone could taste it. Then she pressed a key on her laptop. "Senator Davis," Simone said, "I would like to enter Exhibit A into the record." The giant screens behind the dais flickered. A grainy video appeared. It was time-stamped 2 weeks ago. The setting was the executive break room at Kensington Pharma. On the screen, Hunter Kensington was sitting on a leather sofa. He was holding a scotch glass. He was laughing with 2 other young men. "Turn up the volume, please," Simone requested. The audio crackled, then cleared. Hunter's voice boomed through the Senate chamber. "My dad is a genius," Hunter was saying on the screen. He slurped his drink. "He says the stroke risk only affects the urban demographics. You know, the ones who rely on government handouts anyway." The senators gasped. Richard froze. Hunter continued on the screen. He leaned in conspiratorially. "Dad says if a few thousand black people die off, it actually saves the country money on Social Security. This drug isn't just medicine, boys. It is a population filter. And we are going to get rich cleaning up the mess." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the room was no longer respectful. It was horrified. It was the sound of air being sucked out of a room before an explosion. Richard Kensington was shaking. He tried to stand up, but his legs would not work. "That is out of context," he stammered. "That is just a boy talking nonsense." "Is it?" Simone asked. She pressed another key. Exhibit B. A document appeared on the screen. It was the clinical trial summary that Brad had nearly died to retrieve. The numbers were stark. A red line tracked the mortality rate of African American patients. It spiked vertically. "And here's the cover page," Simone said. The screen zoomed in on a handwritten note in the margins. It was written in blue ink. The handwriting was distinctive. Sharp, angular loops. Mortality rate 15% in target demographic. Cost of recall exceeds projected litigation settlements. Risk level acceptable. Beneath the note was Richard's signature. Simone pointed a finger at the man sitting next to her. "You signed it, Richard. You looked at 200 dead bodies and you wrote the word acceptable." Richard looked at the screen. He looked at his own handwriting. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He was drowning in his own ink. "You killed them," Simone said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. "You killed grandmothers in Detroit. You killed fathers in Atlanta. You killed them to save your quarterly bonus. And when my brother-in-law found the proof, you sent your son to beat him to death in a parking garage." "Liar!" Richard screamed. He lunged across the table. He clawed at Simone's face. It was the desperate act of a cornered animal, but he never reached her. The doors to the chamber burst open. "U.S. Marshals, everybody down." The shout was deafening. 6 agents in tactical gear stormed the floor. They moved with the precision of a hammer strike. Richard Kensington was thrown back into his chair. 2 agents grabbed his arms. They twisted them behind his back. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the microphones. "Get your hands off me," Richard shrieked. "Do you know who I am? I am Richard Kensington. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and negligent homicide." An agent recited. "You have the right to remain silent." On the live television feed, the camera cut away to a breaking news alert. A helicopter shot showed the Kensington mansion in the Hamptons. Police cars surrounded the driveway. The front door had been battered down. Victoria Kensington was being led out in handcuffs. She was wearing a fur coat over her pajamas. In her hands, she clutched a Louis Vuitton bag stuffed with $2 million in diamonds and bearer bonds. She screamed at the officers, kicking and spitting as they shoved her into the back of a squad car. The scene shifted again. JFK International Airport. Hunter Kensington was sprinting across the tarmac toward a private jet. He was looking over his shoulder. He did not see the FBI SUV cut across the runway. The vehicle screeched to a halt, blocking the plane. Agents tackled Hunter to the concrete. The boy who had laughed about population filters was now crying into the asphalt, begging for his father to save him. But his father was being dragged out of the Senate chamber on live national television. Simone stood up. She watched Richard being hauled away. He looked back at her one last time. His eyes were wide with shock. He still could not believe it. He could not believe that the woman he had dismissed as help had just toppled his empire. Simone did not smile. She picked up the hard drive. She smoothed her blazer. She walked out of the chamber, past the cheering crowds, past the stunned reporters, and into the bright afternoon sun. Justice had been served. But she was not finished yet. 6 months later. The sign on the glass building no longer said Kensington Pharma. The gold letters had been ripped down, leaving faint scars on the stone facade. New letters were being installed. Bright silver, clean modern, Phoenix Health. Simone walked through the lobby. It was busy, not with corporate sharks in suits, but with doctors, researchers, and community advocates. She took the private elevator to the top floor. This used to be Richard's sanctuary. It had been filled with hunting trophies and antique weapons. Now it was filled with light. Simone walked to the massive oak desk. She ran her hand over the surface. She had bought the entire company at a bankruptcy auction for pennies on the dollar. The Kensington fortune had been seized to pay the victims' families. Their legacy was dust. She looked at the wall behind the desk. Where Richard's portrait had once hung staring down with arrogant eyes, there was a new photograph. It was a candid shot taken in a hospital garden. Brad was sitting in a wheelchair, his cast finally removed. Tasha was standing behind him, her arms wrapped around his neck. They were both laughing. The sun was shining on their faces. It was a reminder of what they had fought for, a reminder that some things were worth bleeding for. Simone sat down in the chair. It fit her perfectly. She pressed the intercom button. "Send them in." The door opened. A group of reporters entered. They looked different than the ones who had hounded her 6 months ago. They looked respectful. "Ms. Ellis," a reporter from the Times asked, "can you tell us about the new initiative?" Simone stood up. She walked to the window, looking out at the city that was no longer a battlefield, but a home. "We are launching the Kensington reparations program today," Simone said. "But we are calling it the Phoenix Protocol. We are releasing the patent for the heart medication. It will be generic. It will be free for any family with a household income under $50,000. "But how will you make a profit?" the reporter asked. "We are not here to make a profit," Simone said, turning back to them. "We are here to make amends. We are here to prove that a company can heal a community instead of harvesting it." She dismissed the reporters. She wanted a moment alone. She looked at the camera in the corner of the room. The red light was blinking. She knew this feed was going out to her internal network, to the thousands of employees who now worked for a vision instead of a villain. But she also knew who else might be watching. The doubters. The next Richard Kensington, who thought he could trample on the weak. Simone walked closer to the lens. She looked straight into it, breaking the barrier between her world and the viewer. "They thought power was a bloodline," she said softly. "They thought it was something you inherited, like a trust fund or a last name. They thought it flowed in their veins because they were born lucky." She paused. Her eyes were fire. "But they were wrong. Real power is not what you are given. Real power is what you are willing to sacrifice. It is the blood you are willing to spill to protect the truth. It is standing still when they pour wine on you and standing tall when they try to bury you." She leaned in. "My name is Simone Ellis. I built this from the ashes of their hate. And if you are out there thinking you can take it from me, remember one thing. The phoenix does not just rise. It burns everything that tries to cage it. So ask yourself, what will you do when the enemy thinks you are weak?" Simone smiled, and the screen went black. This story reminds us that true power is not inherited through wealth or status. It is earned through the courage to stand firm when the world tries to break you. Simone Ellis taught us that staying silent in the face of injustice is never an option. When the powerful use their influence to hide the truth, it is our duty to speak up, not just for ourselves, but for those who cannot. One voice armed with the truth and unwavering resolve is strong enough to shatter even the thickest glass ceilings and bring down the mightiest empires. If you believe that the truth is worth fighting for, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story of justice served.